Greetings, dear friends. Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery, New Jersey. I'd like to begin, as usual, by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So today I'm going to speak about God in Buddhism. Quite a big topic. Warm welcome to those of you who are joining live, and also to those who join later to listen to this talk. So oftentimes people have the idea that in Buddhism there is no God or no gods, and Buddhists are atheists. They don't believe in God. And it's not quite as simple as that, as many of you will know. So it's really interesting to examine, the relationship between Buddhism and the theistic religions. In the theistic religions, such as Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, there is the belief in one God, the one God who has created everything, and who if we're wise, we kind of align to that God, and we pay homage to that God, and we can oftentimes in theistic religions, there's the sense that that God can meet our needs if we pray and venerate and pay attention and have a spiritual inclination, open our hearts to God. And these are very beautiful and very helpful, of course, approaches to life, to respect that which is greater than ourselves, to sense that there are powers beyond our ken, and to pay homage to that which is beyond and above and greater than ourselves, that we can have some sort of understanding, but not full understanding of. And so we see, of course, in all these religions, people will pray, worship, come together. As in Islam, for instance, 5 times a day, the call is given and everything stops and people make time for God. And God in Islam, I believe, means, literally the word for God means surrender, or the word for the religion means surrender. And so the invitation is to surrender your small mind to the great mind of God, and to trust in God and God's wisdom and God's benevolence and compassion. And there are many names for God in Islam and in all the religions, theistic religions, many ways in which God is kind of touched upon. The concept is impossible to encapsulate in words, but there are many attempts to name God, the 99 names of God in Islam. And this is all very inspiring, and it's very helpful for spiritual progress to seek that which is greater and to seek the good, because in all these religions, of course, there is the moral imperative. God is good, God is love. If we want to seek God, we must open our hearts to the good and shy away from that which is harmful. In Buddhism, of course, we also have the understanding of greater consciousnesses than the human consciousness. And indeed, there are, in the Buddhist cosmology, 31 planes of existence, and most of them are higher planes than the human. And there's very few below. There are very few lower realms: hell, animal realms, ghost realms. And then we have animals, the animal realm I just mentioned, and then the human realm. These are the lower realms. And then above the human realm, 6 planes of angelic or deva, higher beings. And beyond those 6 realms of higher beings, there are the Brahma realms. These are the gods. And there are 16 different planes of existence. So there's not one God in Buddhism. There are many, countless higher beings. And ascending kind of in order from the human realm, going up, we have an ever-increasing subtlety of forms, ever-increasing subtlety of sense desire. So more and more formless realms where the consciousness is ever more expansive. And there's ever more brightness. There's ever more ability to perceive. There's less and less inclination towards the sense realm. Even the most subtle of the sense desires are shed as beings become more and more conscious. There are the gods who create, the gods who delight in others' creations, gods of great radiance, ever more radiant, ever more percipient. The devas who are closest to us, these 6 planes of kind of angelic existence, the devas have also some materiality. There's some physical form to them, but it's much more subtle than the human form, this material realm that we know. They also have sense desire, and they can also experience suffering, but in ever less gross forms. So the sense is that in these realms there's a increasing subtlety of experience, refinement of experience, ethereality, and the consciousness is ever more expansive. And so also the lifespan expands as the planes of existence ascend to the highest gods. There is a sense also in Buddhism that there is an overlord. There is in a way, almighty God. There is a God who's above all the other gods. And that this position is sort of held by one being. And it's very interesting that this being is, even though this being is the mightiest and most, you could say, most conscious, the creator of all that is, yet this God in Buddhism becoming. And however long the lifespan of even the highest God, that lifespan is not infinite. That God is not immortal. And because the lifespan is so long and the consciousness is so vast, the sort of ability to see all things is there. Such a being is under the illusion that they are infinite, immortal, all-knowing, because there's nothing outside of their experience. They know everything that is, they know everything that exists. And so there are a number of suttas in the Pali Canon where the Buddha or one of the Buddha's disciples, particularly Mahamoggallana, who had psychic powers, so he, like the Buddha, had the ability to travel, if you like, to access all the different planes of existence, or almost all of them, to the very highest gods. And so there are a number of accounts of the Buddha or Mahamoggallana or others conversing with, meeting with, sharing on Dharma with gods. And oftentimes the interaction goes along the lines of the Buddha or a great disciple letting God know that actually there's some illusion, some delusion here. Even though the life seems to go on forever, actually there will come a time when even the highest gods experience passing away, a change, a different state. And even in the Deva realms, let alone the God realms, there is, when it comes to the time of death, of change, of falling from that state, there is very little warning. There's no aging process for the Devas. There's no sickness. There's no kind of preparation time. As a human being, we get to, oftentimes, not always, of course, but often, we get to understand through hints, through warnings, through the strokes of fate, that this body is mortal and that the end is approaching. We may get sick, we may have a stroke, we may begin to change physically. If we're lucky enough to grow old, that's going to happen. And so there are warnings, and there's a kind of, often if we're lucky, a gradual process of decline that goes on, so we can prepare ourselves. If we have any wisdom, we're going to want to come to a place of acceptance of our inevitable demise before the last breaths, friends. And we have that chance as human beings very often. Of course, we can be struck down suddenly. We can die very instantaneously sometimes and miss that opportunity. Although who knows what the last moments may be like in terms of their expansiveness in time, that perceived expansion of time when we're in traumatic situations is very interesting. So we can experience a great deal in a very short time. But for the gods, for the devas, there's very little time, because all of a sudden, at some point, they will notice some change in their experience. For the devas who have a subtle physical form, they may notice a slight weakness. They may notice physical experiences they've never had before, such as sweating or shaking. And then all of a sudden, it's over. So there's very little preparation time, and it's over means there's a change from that state. And for beings who are in the highest planes of existence, the change from that state is inevitably going to be a change in the way of falling down, a descent. And this is quite horrendous. One can imagine what it would be like to fall from grace in this way and find oneself in a different situation that is much less hospitable, much less blissful, much less subtle the experience may be. So the Buddha, Mahamoggallana, in various suttas, I posted one of them in the suggested reading, Brahma Nimantika Sutta, where Baka the Brahma is visited by the Buddha. And the Buddha was telling this story in this sutta in Majjhima 49 of going to visit, going to see, connecting with this plane of existence where Baka the Brahma lives. And Baka the Brahma is completely delighting in his existence, their existence, as the gods do. There isn't any suffering for the gods. They are delighting and enjoying their very subtle, refined states of existence. And these are states of goodness, friends. There is the Brahma Viharas manifesting. The consciousness is full of love, compassion, gladness, joy, and peace. These are beautiful abidings of good beings, holy good beings. And so Baka the Brahma is delighting in this existence and has no sense of any kind of danger or drawback. And the Buddha chose to visit Baka the Brahma in order to help this being to wake up to the fact that this wonderful celestial existence is finite. It's going to end. And so then the encouragement is to let go of becoming, let go of delighting, to wake up to the danger, because however good it is for Baka the Brahma at this point, this cannot last, and suffering is bound to follow unless Baka can wake up to the path of practice. And Baka the Brahma is very resistant to hearing this bad news, which is actually the good news, as we know. But he doesn't want to hear it, and he's also full of conceits, So there's a danger in power and a great mind that there can be a conceit, there can be, of course, attachment to this experience of beingness. And this attachment is, of course, suffering, but it's not visible, it's not perceivable as suffering, only delighting in that. So Baka, delighting in his good fortune, doesn't want to know that this good fortune may end. And the Buddha resorts to displaying his psychic powers to the extent that he can disappear from Baka the Brahma. Baka the all-seeing, the all-knowing, is shocked to experience this being, this human being, the Buddha, disappearing, and he's unable to find him. And the Baka himself is unable to disappear from the Buddha, even though he tries to do so, before the Buddha's demonstration of greater understanding, greater consciousness, that which has let go of consciousness, that which has let go of suffering entirely, that which has let go of becoming, that has let go of bliss, that has let go of the heavenly realms, is able to disappear from them, from those beings, imperceivable, impossible to see, to know Nibbana, unless we have let go of all suffering. And so back at the Brahma, when the Buddha is able to disappear from his seeing, from his knowing, is shocked. And this is the way that he can open his mind to the possibility that there may be something beyond even the God realms of existence. There's the understanding then that even the greatest of gods are bound up in samsara. What comes up must go down, that their life, however vast the period of time that they exist, their life will come to an end, and then back in the wheel. Which plane of existence will they land in next? And so it goes, friends. We're constantly transmigrating from one to another, not as individuals, not as discrete entities, but this cycle of birth and death goes on, one plane of existence to another. And so the imperative then from the Buddha, whenever he was teaching, not just human beings, but also the devas and the gods, the imperative is to wake up to the danger here, however good it is, however bad it is, however suffering, however much pleasure, however much pain, there is an end to this, and that is to let go of identifying with any of these experiences, to renounce delighting in the pleasures. And we can experience this for ourselves, of course. One could say that all of these realms of existence are to be found within this human existence, in this mind and heart. When we investigate deeply, we know hell when we're caught up in suffering to the extent that we're burning, raging, completely out of alignment with anything peaceful. And we also can know through our meditation, peaceful, blissful, very still, very equanimous states. We can practice metta, we can practice karuna, mudita, and upekkha, these divine abidings. We can practice the Brahma Viharas. These are to be cultivated. If we cultivate these alone without considering the danger, then we will be heading towards the God realms, the divine realms, because these are the states of mind that exist in these higher realms of existence. There are teachings where the Buddha and other disciples, famously Sariputta, was teaching, I think his name was Dhananjani, to aim for the divine abidings, to make them his practice and to incline his heart and mind in this direction, so that after death he was reborn in a higher plane of existence, in a God realm. But we don't want to settle for this because of this understanding that even the gods have to suffer in the end, that there is no perpetual heaven for any being whatsoever. I could also just point out that there's also no creator. Speaking about the highest God, the greatest God, the overlord, that is an understanding in Buddhism that there is such a being right at the sort of peak of the pyramid of existence. Even for such a being, the understanding is that they are not actually the creator of all the rest of the pyramid. They're not creating samsara. They're part of it. They're inextricably intertwined with it all because of this becoming, because of this delusion of self, because of ignorance, because of suffering. So even the highest God is not actually the creator. there is the impression, very strong impression, of being the creator, because everything is unfolding in their wise, all-seeing gaze. And yet, in Buddhism, the understanding is that samsara is rolling on endlessly, beginninglessly and endlessly. And every now and then, the highest God falls. That lifespan, that karmic energy, impulse, momentum comes to an end. That God falls. And then, inevitably, naturally, as a matter of course, another being takes their place. So that energy comes up again. There's another sense of becoming, being something, in this case, the highest of gods. And that being immediately believes, receives a very strong impression that they are the creator of this whole pyramid, this whole cyclic existence that we call samsara. So the delusion of even the highest God is that ignorance which is maintaining their position in samsara. And so we're all deluded in the same way, whatever plane of existence we're on, whether we're human, whether we're divine, deva, angelic forms, very subtle physical forms, or whether we're formless gods, mental existence, ever more refined, states of bliss and well-being. Every single plane of existence has the nature of suffering because there is ignorance. It's imbued with ignorance, this ignorance of not seeing that there is no end to suffering in this perpetual cycle, going from one state to another. And that there is a way out is the Buddha's great offering. And how generously and compassionately the Buddha taught not only human beings, he taught the devas, he taught the gods to try to wake them up, to see the danger in samsara, to see the pain and suffering that comes from delighting in sense pleasures or any kind of pleasure whatsoever. In the case of the gods, the highest states of mental bliss, peace, So the Buddha, there are countless teachings where not just the Buddha, but also disciples of the Buddha were discussing the teachings with gods. And oftentimes, sharing the Dharma meant that the practitioners, the Buddha himself, were conveying the Dharma and helping those beings in higher planes of existence. How remarkable is that? To be able to have insight that can be shared with the gods, with the devas. Also, of course, as higher beings, beings in higher planes of existence, existing in higher planes of existence, there is a reason that that experience is there, and the reason is virtue, is goodness. And friends, I just have to pause for a moment because I have to put a lead into my laptop to, to stop the battery from running out. Good. So yeah, there are reasons why beings are in these higher realms, and the reason for all these realms is that of goodness, virtue. And so the gods, the devas, have more virtue, more goodness. Their karma is so beautiful, so pure, so good is the intentionality and wholesomeness, harmlessness. Of course, that goes along with the experience of peace and well-being, of happiness, as we know, as we can experience ourselves. And because there's so much goodness, there's so much, you could say, ethical purity in ever increasing degrees in these higher planes of existence, then there is the capacity to see clearly and to understand, the Dhamma. And so there are also accounts of gods who have given teachings that the Buddha has praised and invited, the monastics and the disciples to consider, to pay attention to. And let's remember also that when the Buddha became the Buddha, he inclined towards silence, towards not conveying the Dharma teachings, because he felt, as he told us, that it would be too difficult to enable beings to understand the path of practice and how to relate to their experience in such a way that we can find our way to letting go of suffering. But it was thanks to a God that the Buddha was persuaded, to open and change that way of considering and to teach the Dharma. And, it's very wonderful that this God was able to, without Sahampati, this very high God who was of great insight and understanding, without his intervention, we wouldn't have the Buddha Dhamma. And that's something very interesting to consider when we look at the relationship between God and the Buddha, between theistic and Buddhist religions. So Sahampati came to the Buddha. God came to the Buddha and paid respects to him because he recognized, Sahampati recognized that something had something had transpired here, that this being, the Buddha, had woken up, and that this was something beyond this God's comprehension. But he knew enough to appreciate that this was something monumental, magnificent, world-changing, of great importance, to keep this energy going, to roll the wheel of Dhamma, to set in motion the wheel of Dhamma, which of course is running, if you like, in the very opposite direction to the wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering, endless suffering. And so Sahampati begged the Buddha and said famously, as many of you will know, he said, there are beings with little dust in their eyes who will understand what you're teaching. Please don't let them continue to suffer when they can be helped by you. It's a really beautiful story. And this account of Sahampati's visit to the Buddha to encourage the Dhamma in this way is chanted constantly in the Buddhist world as a way to invite a Dharma talk. So to encourage somebody to speak on Dharma, the invitation is given in just this way. Please speak on Dharma. There are those who will understand these teachings. And so even to this day, Sahampati is remembered and in a way revered for having enabled the Buddha to teach, to have encouraged him. So there is this amazing relationship. And even though the Buddha was teaching the gods, teaching the devas, so too the gods, the devas, are nothing other, friends, than the full expression of our goodness, of our wisdom, of our consciousness. Consciousness at its most refined. That is what these planes of existence are. The jhana, when we meditate and we develop degrees of focus, of stillness, of samadhi, then we can really taste here and now in this human form what it is to have the consciousness of higher beings. When we practice metta, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, mudita, when we practice equanimity, bring it to mind, make much of these qualities and grow them, develop them, cultivate them. When we do this, we are aligning ourselves with these higher realms of existence. The difference between this approach and practicing in a theistic religion is that rather than worshipping or giving our sense of agency over to the gods, we are appreciating, aiming for, wishing to cultivate the very same qualities, the very same consciousness of those gods, because we are aiming to, grow ourselves on the path of practice and to not rely on any other being outside of ourselves to help us, because we recognize that the only way that we can develop, cultivate the path, the only way that we can aim for nibbana is to work on this mind and heart ourselves. Nobody can change things for us. Nobody can purify our hearts for us. Nobody's going to be able to bless us and in doing so change our karmic predicament for us. It's simply not possible. Only we can do the work to purify our own hearts and to develop the wisdom that enables us to fully let go of suffering, fully let go of clinging and craving, fully let go of identifying anything whatsoever as me or mine or myself. Only we can do this work. And there's great skill, no doubt, in supplicating the gods, venerating the gods, aligning one's heart with the qualities, heavenly qualities of the gods. But even more beneficial, even more skillful is to develop those qualities within ourselves and to stand on our own feet in a way and to take responsibility for our own situation, because only through taking responsibility 100% for this one can we really enable change to happen, to come out of suffering. We have to embrace and understand the suffering here. And in fully understanding the suffering, then we have some way, some possibility of letting go of that suffering through insight. No other being can do that for us. And so this is the important relationship, the difference in relationship between human beings and God or gods in Buddhism as compared to theistic religions. It's not that the results differ greatly, oftentimes, but the Buddha is the only spiritual teacher who has given us this real wake-up call, isn't it, friends, to recognize that tendency to want, to hope, to look to some higher power out there that will take responsibility away from us and do the work for us and make things okay. And that very natural, very human inclination, the theistic religions are nothing but an expression of that. They are an expression of our deepest heartfelt wish to be free from suffering. But the way to be free from suffering is not to stop there, but rather to recognize, as the Buddha did, that whatever existence, whatever subtlety, whatever goodness, whatever luminosity, whatever all-knowingness there may be as a possibility, we are in the end invited, if we're wise, if we understand the Dhamma, to let go of that, let go of God, let go of all the good qualities, let go of the aspiration for something better, let go of the hope for heaven, let go of it, because however good it looks, however wonderful, however sublime, however radiant, however blissful, still there is always the seed of suffering. Every God has the seed of suffering, very, very tiny. The God, very, very great, very, very vast, very long lasting, way beyond our human comprehension of time. And yet the seed of suffering is there. And this seed of suffering is what the Buddha was inviting the gods whom he taught to recognize, to find it, to seek it out and to examine it, and to recognize then that this seed of suffering, this inevitable suffering that's on the way at some point in the very distant future, is the most important thing that can be attended to. And how difficult, friends, for the gods to attend to this seed of suffering. It's very difficult for beings in higher realms to actually have any inclination whatsoever toward the fullness of the Dhamma. Very difficult when everything is so almost perfect, so good, so heavenly, so blissful, so divine. How difficult. The Devas also had more appreciation of suffering, because there's still some suffering in these very subtle physical realms of existence, and yet they would often fail to develop any interest in the Dharma because it's good. Where they are is very good. For human beings, we are blessed to have enough suffering, for sure. There's plenty isn't there, of suffering around us and within us. And because we have this friction, this rub, this constant goad, towards, it goads us towards waking up to the danger in samsara. We have much more ability to comprehend this, strangely but truly, than the gods, than the devas. And so it is difficult for them, and yet possible for all beings to wake up to the Dharma. May all beings wake up to the Dharma teachings. May we all be able to let go of suffering, let go of delight, let go of delighting in this or that. Recognize that every pleasure, every blissful state, every refined state has the seed of suffering within it. Let's focus on dukkha. Let's focus on suffering and allow ourselves to thereby understand suffering, and through understanding suffering to let go of the delusions of self, to let go of craving and clinging, to let go of becoming, friends. Awam. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I'm going to have a little look at the chat and see if there are any questions. If you have any questions about the gods, I haven't gone into specifics. You can certainly all look up the 31 planes of existence. It's very interesting to see how they are labeled, the names of all these different kinds of gods and devas. It's very fascinating to consider. You can also find out the lifespans of these various beings. It's all very, in a way, out there, but also we can say good to read about and learn about these planes of existence, but we can surely consider how they manifest for us in this human realm right now, in this human mind and heart. There is the way to really consider these different states of being is to feel them out. They're palpable for us as human beings. We can recognize that the mind is moving from state to state, and let this be our way of investigation. I'd like to finish by reading you, actually. I'm going to read you a beautiful teaching. This is a teaching from a god. So here's a teaching from God. There are many teachings from gods in the Pali Canon, and that's another interesting thing to consider. We're far from atheists, aren't we? We're more open to the teachings of Dhamma, wherever they come from, open to the existence of gods and the Overlord, the one Almighty God. We are open to that. We can only have, the highest respect and, in a way, veneration for any being that is in a state of consciousness that is greater than our own, that, is beyond and above our own consciousness, states of goodness, that are beyond, way beyond our own degrees of virtue. We can only venerate and respect these states of existence, these beings, if you like. And yet, the crucial aspect, as I've said, is that we don't want to focus on veneration of the gods, but we want to cultivate the good qualities and go beyond that and be willing to let go. Keep letting go, friends. This is the way to move closer, to incline our hearts toward the ultimate freedom from all suffering that is Nibbana. So I'm going to read you this little sutta from Samyutta Nikaya 2.8. It's called Tayana Sutta because I'd like to end with a teaching from a god. Tayana was a god, the glorious god, who was formerly, we're told in this sutta, he was formerly a religious founder. What great goodness to encourage then so many people to incline towards spiritual life. So this was his good karma, and he's now, or she, or they, or this karmic energy is now in godlike existence. Not sure which realm. So the glorious god Tayana, formerly a religious founder, came to visit the Buddha late at night. He lit up, or they lit up the entire Jeta's Grove where the Buddha was staying. The great luminosity of the god, great radiance of the god. And Tayana recited these verses in the Buddha's presence. They said, strive and cut the stream, dispel sensual pleasures. A sage who does not give up sensual pleasures is not reborn in a unified state. So we remain scattered, we remain caught up, we cannot experience subtle states, even if we cannot give up sense pleasures. If one is to do what should be done, one should staunchly strive, for the life gone forth, when laxly led, just stirs up dust all the more. So this exhortation to keep striving, friends. A bad deed is better left undone, for it will plague you later on. A good deed is better done, one that does not plague you. When kusa grass is wrongly grasped, it only cuts the hand. So too, the ascetic life, when wrongly taken, drags you to hell. It's like warning, danger. We have to keep making the right efforts. Any lax act, any corrupt observance, or suspicious spiritual life is not very fruitful. That is what the god Tayana said. And then he bowed and respectfully circled the Buddha before vanishing right there. And the Buddha told the monastics about this visitation. And he said to them, he repeated the god Tayana's verses. And he said to them, mendicants, learn the verses of Tayana. Memorize the verses of Tayana. Remember them. These verses are beneficial and relate to the fundamentals of the spiritual life. So we have much to learn from the gods. And the Buddha was the teacher of gods and humans. And so let's incline our hearts, friends, to the teachings of the Buddha and give them all our energy. And as the god Tayana said, to maintain our virtue, avoid any kind of harm, and to live as authentically as we can the holy life, which for the monastics is a certain way. We are hugely protected and guided and supported by our rules, by our Vinaya, to live in an uncluttered, very undistracted way. But for all of us, let's make our life the holy life by following the Eightfold Noble Path, giving it our all, developing in wisdom and letting go. And so making the most of this very short, relatively extremely brief human life that we have. Very short, very precious. Every moment counts. Wishing you every blessing for your practice. I'm just going to see in case there's any questions. We have got 5 minutes. And there's something I just popped up. Sina, I'll just share with you all Sina's question. Like to ask a question about ordaining as a bhikkhuni. Oh, that's a big question. Which monastery would I recommend? What are the first steps? Okay, Sina, Phoenicia, I'd like to write you my email, which fortunately is very simple, and invite you to email me with your email, and I will write back and I will start a conversation with you in order to answer your question, and we'll see it through. Thank you for asking. So, dear friends, all good wishes to you. Wonderful to see your familiar names, those who've joined the live stream. I look forward to hopefully offering Dharma next week. All being well.